The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Mr. Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Natha.
Present.
Assemblywoman Annie.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tracy. Assemblywoman Venetia.
Present.
Assemblywoman Jill.
That was too easy for you. Jill.
Assemblywoman Bia. Or B?
Here.
Assemblyman John.
¿Cómo estás?
Assemblywoman Susie.
Hola.
Assemblyman Andy.
I'm here.
Assemblyman Richard.
Here.
Assemblywoman Clara.
Present.
Assemblywoman Selena.
Absent.
Chair Edgar.
Presente. Please let the record reflect that we have a quorum. I know Assemblywoman Brown May is presenting a bill in a different committee. Mr. Secretary, please mark her as absent excused, and should she be able to join us at a later time, please mark her as present. Good morning, members. I hope everybody's doing well. We started in very good spirits this morning, having some fun and positive energy here with celebrating April Fools. And I hope the members recognize that that was the intent with the pronouncing everybody's first names as opposed to your last. That was at my request, and I forced our secretary to do that. So know that that was my doing. Couple of things. So first of all, I'd like to take a very quick personal point of privilege at this time. It is my father's birthday. I know that it is not customary for him to watch hearings. I don't think he's actually ever watched one, but I just very quickly wanted to take a few seconds to wish him a very happy birthday. Papá, sabes que te quiero mucho. Gracias por toda tu entrega. Aquí estamos en Carson City. Te mando todo el amor y gracias por la oportunidad que nos has brindado en esta vida. Feliz cumpleaños, papá. Te quiero mucho. So with that,
Happy birthday.
Thank you all. Appreciate that. So I'm going to take the agenda slightly out of order today in the interest of helping some of our members who have 40 different things that they're trying to juggle at this time. So I think the way we can go about it is we'll do Assembly Bill 245 second, and we'll do Assembly Bill 325 first, and then we'll close it out with Assembly Bill 365. So do we have Assemblywoman Kasama present? I will give her some time to jump in. I don't believe I see her yet. But if we could give her a heads up, that we'd like to start with her just in the interest of helping our other folk get this taken care of. While we're doing that, I want to remind everybody that to please keep your microphone on mute unless you are speaking. Please make sure you give yourself an opportunity to ask a few questions, but because we're in a time crunch now, if you could pick your favorite question, maybe one or two, and try to limit it to that, just for the sake of allowing for this to move as fast as we can. We're at a big time crunch, and as you saw yesterday, every meeting keeps going later and later. So I would ask that if you pick your favorite questions and focus on those. But with that, do we have an Assemblywoman present yet? Let's see. Then let's do this then. There's no reason why I can't go first. So rather than starting with her, we'll start off with Assembly Bill 245. And if somebody can please notify Assemblywoman Kasama that we'll be going to her second. And then that way she has time to join us a little bit at a later time. So we'll do Assembly Bill 245, and then we'll move on to Assembly Bill 325. If I could now hand over the virtual gavel to our Vice Chair Torres, please.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 245. This bill increases certain fees relating to notaries, public, and document preparation services. Chair Flores, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. If I could just ask, and by the way, Madam Vice Chair, I do see that Assemblywoman Kasama has joined us. Assemblywoman Kasama, my apologies. We took things slightly out of order, and we were going to ask that you go first. However, I think we just opened up the hearing on Assembly Bill 245. So if you'd like to, we'll just go ahead and have you go second. And my apologies for that confusion.
No problem. Thank you. Ready when
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Good morning, Madam Vice Chair, members of the esteemed Committee on Government Affairs. I am Assemblyman Edgar Flores for the record, and I am here to proudly present Assembly Bill 245. I wanted to very quickly offer a roadmap of how I intend for the conversation to proceed. I'd like to first explain the genesis of this bill through the history of the work we've done in this space. Afterwards, I'd like to explain how I think this bill addresses some concerns that we still have under NRS 240A and 240. And then I'd like to hand over the presentation to Mr. Mike Draper, who will talk a little bit about the folk he represents that he's worked alongside of and why he thinks that this bill is so necessary. You will notice that on that list, there is a conceptual amendment. I ask that you please review that. I will simultaneously be referring to the actual bill language and the original, and the conceptual amendment, and I'll explain how they go hand in hand. And then afterwards, we'd like to hand over the presentation to Ms. Gail Anderson from the Nevada Secretary of State's office, who is in the neutral position. However, she will go into how, if this bill were to be enacted, how they would go about implementing the conceptual amendment and the language found in the original bill. So way back in 2011, many years before I even considered ever running for office or ever thought about it, and I would say when I was still very hopeful and I thought it could change the world, I had an opportunity to publish a study through the University of Austin, Texas, on the unauthorized practice of law and access to legal services in Southern Nevada. And I start there because I've been in this space and having this conversation for some time now. And it's something that I have seen both community members and family members impacted directly by. And so I'm very happy that I can continue to work in this space. At the time, I think anecdotally, anybody who comes from an underrepresented community can probably relate to anecdotal stories of having family members or friends taken advantage of by folk pretending to be lawyers or by predatory notarios or that what we have now, doc preparation services. And there's a lot of pain that comes with this, because imagine if somebody is giving you legal advice on a family matter where you're fighting the custody of your child or something similar, and you lose because you're being ill-advised by somebody who doesn't necessarily know what they're talking about. Or imagine if you're doing some immigration paperwork and it gets done incorrectly, again, because you think that this individual is actually an attorney. For those of you that are new to the committee, the issue is that in a lot of different countries, particularly those Spanish-speaking countries, the word notario, which is an exact translation of notary, has a very different meaning. In fact, it's harder to be a notario, it's harder to be a notary in other countries than it is to be an attorney, because there's a requirement for you to be an attorney plus X amount of years that you've put into the profession. And so that's where the confusion starts with a lot of the migrant communities. When they come to the US, they bring the definition that they know from different countries. And in fact, here, as we all know, notary public has a very different purpose and function. And so over the years, I've been working on numerous bills to try to address those concerns and really tack on different penalties and criminalize some of this behavior. And so now I think we're in a place where we've created a lot of different laws, where we've gone after, been able to go after some of these predatory businesses. On the other side of it is all the good actors, which is the majority of the small businesses out there. I've had an opportunity to work closely and form a relationship with Fingerprinting Express, but there's a whole host of other ones. And these are folk that are small business owners who wake up every single morning. You'll see the owners working and operating their own businesses. They're doing everything right. And so the question that came to me was, well, how do we help them? Right? If we want to make sure to help the community by getting the predatory businesses out, but how do we also help the good actors in the space? And that's where I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Draper. And he bounced off some ideas on what he thought would be an immediate positive impact to benefit the good actors in this space. Obviously, going after the bad actors is important, because if we get rid of the bad actors, it helps the good actors and level the playing field. Where the good actors are always consistently doing everything by the book, if you get rid of the bad actors, then you help the good actors benefit. But the other question is how much they could charge. So that's where I can very quickly get into the bill itself. If you're looking at the bill itself, you'll see in section 1, we're increasing the amount they can charge, their fees they can charge for signatures. And again, Mr. Draper will go into why this is relevant and how these amounts, how we kind of decided on these amounts. But I just wanted to very broadly speak on, we were hoping by doing this that small businesses can just make a little bit more money. Obviously, when they were charging $5 or $2.50, they weren't making a whole lot of profit there, especially in a world where they're obligated to pay more in a bond, where their registration fees had gone up, where it's just the cost of running a business is just so much more expensive. So everything has been going up except how much they could charge. And so we thought that logically it made sense that we ensured that they could start charging more so that these small business operators can make some money. On the flip side, one of the things that we talked about is also increasing the fee. So you'll notice in the actual bill itself, in page 4 and in they're both in page 4, that the registration fee is going from and it's an annual registration fee of $25 going up to $50 for those in the doc preparation services world, and $50 to $100 for those in the notary world. And the justification for doing this particular issue, this increase, is that because we know they're going to be charging more, in 3 or 4 or 5 different signatures that they do, notarizations, better said, they're going to make those extra $50. But those $50, if you see the conceptual amendment under amendment number 3 at the very bottom, and that's uploaded to Nellis, you'll see that we want to use that fee increase. So the additional $50 under 240 and the additional $25 under 240A, that money will be placed into a special fund that can solely be used for enforcement and of going after these predatory notarios and document preparation service businesses. Again, they are the minority of the industry. They are not the majority of the industry. They are the minority, but we have to be able to go after them. And unfortunately, even though we've continuously, for the past, since 2013, been putting language to go after some of these predatory actors, the reality is if you want teeth, you have to give money to the enforcement side. And so that's what we're utilizing this money for. Specifically, we want to create an additional compliance investigator 2 position. We'll have Ms. Gail Anderson get into the numbers of how much it would cost to create that position and how we believe that this increase will actually be right around that amount that we need for that. The other thing that we want to do that you'll see under amendment number 2 is we want to give the Nevada Secretary of State's office fine authority. So presently, when there is a bad actor out there, typically all the Secretary of State's office can do is really just try to, let's assume they're not licensed. If they're not licensed, there's not a lot the Secretary of State's office can do. I mean, they'll continue to practice without the license. If they are licensed and they're bad actors, they're doing things that they're not supposed to, you really are forced to just have to revoke the license or suspend it. But the issue with that is we want these registrants to come into compliance. We want them to do things correctly. we shouldn't, it shouldn't be if you're out of compliance, you're out of the 240A or 240 industry. We don't want that. We want to make sure that you can continue to operate. So through fine authority, we can actually give the Nevada Secretary of State a little bit more teeth. And so we're adding the same language that you find under NRS 240. NRS 240 talks about notary publics. NRS 248 talks about document preparation services. That's why you hear me talking about both of them. Under NRS 240 now, we do have a fine authority. The Nevada Secretary of State's office does have that. So we want to replicate something similar to what we see in NRS 240 and put that in NRS 248 so that we can put the fine authority for doc preparation services. And again, by doing that, we're going to give the Secretary of State a little bit more teeth. So with that, if I could hand over the presentation to Mr. Draper, who will then get into a little bit about how those numbers were looked at, what surrounding states are doing, and he could talk about some of the great actors we have in this state, in this space. Mr. Draper, please. Mr. Draper, I believe you're on mute.
I think after a year, I would have figured that out, but still work to go. Good morning, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. It's always great to be before this committee. This is easily my favorite committee that I'm testifying in front of right now. And I want to thank the chairman for his thoughtful leadership. This is definitely an issue we've been discussing off and on and different things related to it over the last couple of years. He's done a lot of work, as he mentioned, in this area, an area that often gets overlooked. And today, that's one of the things that we're working to address. Certainly, this is an opportunity to support small business, but really it's also an opportunity it's a necessity to offset cost. The cost of being a notary in this state it just occurred to me, I'm not sure I introduced myself either. Being on mute threw me off, but my name is Mike Draper. I'm a partner at Argentum Partners. The last name is Draper, and I'm here today representing Fingerprinting Express. And Fingerprinting Express has 5 locations throughout Nevada. They do the latest in fingerprint technology and background checks, but they also offer a number of other services, including notarial services. And really why we're here is because over the last many years, the cost of being a notary has gone up substantially. In some cases, for notary supplies, it's gone up by 4 times. The bonding has gone up by more than 2 times. And notary prices in our state are set in statute, as they are in many other states. There's also many states that don't set their prices in statute. But of our surrounding states, Nevada is easily the lowest in what we can charge, or one of the lowest in what we can charge for notarial services. And as the costs have gone up, it's become substantially important to offset the cost of being a notary with the ability for notaries to charge more for their services. So what we're proposing in this bill is a moderate price increase to offset the costs. It's comparative and relative to the surrounding states and many other states in the country. For instance, Arizona, California, Utah, Idaho, all allow for their notaries to charge more than what our notaries currently can charge. These prices weren't picked at random. They were picked to be competitive with sort of the national averages. But also, as the chairman mentioned, to add an enforcement component and support the Secretary of State's office, who also, Ms. Anderson has spent quite a bit of time working with the chairman also on issues related to this over the last many years. And I know that giving the Secretary of State's office more tools in order to make sure that we have the right people doing the right things to protect Nevadans, but also support Nevada small businesses, has been very important to them as well. I'll be brief. The chairman already went through the bill, so there's really no need for me to go through it again. Certainly, I can answer questions. I've also asked our notary, or one of our notaries from Argentum Partners, Robert Masterson, to join in case there's any questions that are far above my pay grade about what it takes to be a notary or anything along those lines. But in the interest of time and knowing you have a busy schedule, I'll leave my presentation at that.
Assemblyman Edgar Flores for the record. Thank you, Mr. Draper. Next, we could go to Ms. Gail Anderson, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Vice Chair, for this meeting. I'm Gail Anderson, Deputy Secretary of State for Southern Nevada. As Chair Flores has indicated, the Secretary of State is testifying in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 245. I also want to thank Assemblyman Flores for his attention and his work and his understanding in this area of law. He understands the practices, the issues, and the needs, and it's very much appreciated. I oversee the Document Preparation Services Program section for the Secretary of State. That section currently consists of 2 staff, 1 administrative assistant who handles all of the registration processing, which includes annual bond monitoring, as well as other administrative duties for the program. And then also 1 compliance investigator, 2, who handles a caseload that ranges between 180 at the higher end to maybe 145 at the lower end at any given time, investigations and examinations. These past 2 years, we have been stepping up the enforcement aspect of this law. It was took effect in 2014. We currently have 1,463 active registrants. During this current fiscal year through the month of March, we have processed 722 registrants, new registrants, with another 114 in under review status, which means we're waiting for their background investigation report, and 42 additional that we are awaiting bond. The majority of our caseload actually is agency initiated, and it is predominantly in 2 areas. Now, we do receive consumer and customer complaints and referrals. We've had referrals from judges. We have had referrals from the Consumer Affairs Division at Business and Industry, and then, of course, direct complaints, and sometimes complaints filed by another registrant, perhaps with another business entity. These areas that we predominantly see are in unregistered activity, people who are not registered that should be registered, advertising issues about what they're advertising that they're going to do, and usually along with that advertising and their actual practices of their business suggest the registrant is providing advice, legal advice, or recommendations to a client about their possible legal rights or remedies or the options they might have, or the selection of documents or strategies to address their issue. And as Assemblyman Flores has mentioned, these are really unlicensed practice of law issues. We do have the ability to coordinate and review some things with the state bar, but we try and address them on the document preparation side just to get these people to stop doing those practices. They're basically giving legal advisement and preparing documents that would require a licensed attorney, and often that leads to severe consequences for that client and harm. We've also had referrals from the legal aid organizations in Southern and Northern Nevada. So our current jurisdiction in Chapter 248 gives us the authority to revoke a registrant for violations of the chapter or suspend their registration for the lapse or cancellation of their required bond. But there is no fine remedy or authority outside of a criminal proceeding that would be handled by the district attorney or the attorney general's office, or a civil proceeding in court, which of course is a very extreme measure with a lot of resources necessary to even get those cases taken up by either the district attorney or the attorney general. They have to be pretty high level dollar harm amounts. Fine authority would give much more incentive to a registrant to respond to our investigator. to address and correct identified issues that have been noticed to them by letter as a result of an examination or an investigation of a complaint filed with our office. So that is always addressed. We follow the proceedings, administrative proceedings of 233B in terms of notification of what we're looking at and what needs to be remedied. But sometimes they don't respond at all. And we send a follow-up, and sometimes many weeks and months pass. And we would like the ability to get their attention and to have them address things that wouldn't necessitate a fine. We just want them to do it right. Fine authority is also requested for the very important area of unregistered activity. This program inception in 2014, since then, at the very beginning, the emphasis was on just bringing people into compliance, get registered. We now find, however, people who have registered, they let their registrations lapse, they continue conducting business. They know better. We find people that we have notified by a cease and desist that they need to be registered, and they continue their practices. We do take civil action on those in court. Then we find people that maybe started a registration application in our online system and never complete it. And so we know they're aware of this law, but they're ignoring the requirement to be registered. So we would like that fine authority for unregistered activity as well. And a fine penalty is appropriate for willful violations of the law. In the conceptual draft, as has been mentioned, we would really like NRS 240A to mirror, as much as we can, some of the aspects of notary law in NRS 240, perhaps addressing this and calling it a civil penalty instead of an administrative fine. They are sister chapters of law. When 240A was drafted in the 2013 legislative session, and while they're not identical in their jurisdiction, they're very closely related. The last thing I would like to mention is Assemblyman Flores presents in sections 2 and 3 of the original bill enhancement or the fee increase to provide funding to enhance enforcement of NRS 240A, document preparation services. The particular way to address this is with an additional investigator. With one investigator statewide, that's a huge challenge. We travel north. We didn't last year during COVID. We look forward to resuming that, as well as Southern Nevada. And we really need to make a trip, it looks like, into Nye County, into the Pahrump area to take a look at some practices going on there. We drive to locations locally and in Northern Nevada that we believe have unregistered activity to gather information for our cease and desist or for the action we're going to take. So our office is going to submit a fiscal note for a compliance investigator 2 position that would correspond with the intent of this bill to enhance enforcement. And just in mention of that, our current registration fees have ranged around $65,500 the last couple of fiscal years. And so to double that would bring in that much at least again as we enhance enforcement and get more people registered. Those registration fees, of course, will be enhanced as well. And an additional compliance investigator 2 position at a step 1 is very close to that amount. It's a little closer to $66,000 a year, just the salary and benefits portion. And so that is what we were targeting in looking at, because the way to enhance enforcement is for another investigator to help us be able to handle more and more quickly. So those are my prepared comments. Of course, I'm available for questions. Thank you very much.
Assemblyman Edgar Flores, for the record. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I think that summarizes the intent of the bill. I will just echo, and I'm glad Ms. Anderson made the mention that the Nevada bar and just the attorneys often don't engage in this space because they don't believe they have the teeth to go after folk that are pretending to be lawyers and that they are not attorneys themselves. I will say, however, as we've heard the federal administration talking about potential immigration reform, this and that, we've already started to see a bunch of advertisement out in the community talking about come in and we'll start prepping your paperwork so that if there's ever immigration reform, you can be first in line. There isn't even any paperwork to be provided. That doesn't exist yet. There's no real guidance from the federal government. No law has been passed yet. So we're already seeing this problem and why enforcement is so important. And I will also say, just to call out, that we also have some garbage attorneys out there who are putting some advertisements out I've heard it on the radio, and we have to go after them too. I think the legal community has a responsibility to go after that garbage. But here, I think the focus is on getting rid of some of the, enforcing some of the issues we have with some of the limited bad actors, and that we empower the good ones and let them make some money. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, for your testimony. Are there any questions for the committee? I do see Assemblymember Ellison has a question, so I'll go to him first. But if you have any other questions, please put it in the chat.
Thank you, Madam. I'm glad you let me come in there because I will have to be signing off when this call comes in. One of the things is that on these fees increases, I didn't think it was ever to make money. It was a service to bring people in to where they could actually help the people and cover their costs. I didn't know it was a money-making operation because, I mean, the banks used to do it for free. Now none of them do it. So that was one of the questions. And when you go in the bathrooms, you can see where they write on the wall, they'll do it for $1, but they're not licensed either. So anyway, if you could answer that, sir, and I do like the bill. I think it's the only thing that is the fees is what scares me. If you could answer that, thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Madam Vice Chair, through you to Assemblyman Ellison, Assemblyman Edgar Flores, for the record. So, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of small businesses that do this and make a livelihood out of this. I will say that most of the small businesses that are in this space do this plus. I don't know that they solely focus on this. You will hear about some mobile notaries who sometimes go to location A, B, C, and D, and they make that their main focus of their business. But for the most part, folk that are in this space do this amongst other things. And the idea is absolutely for them to be able to cover their cost. Charging $7.50 or $15, they're not making a whole lot of money there. And so what we're saying is they already have to pay more for a bond. They already have to pay more for the stamp. They already have to pay more for just the everyday operation of this business model. But we haven't given them an opportunity to charge just a little bit more. And again, $7.50 or $15 doesn't seem like they're going to be making a whole lot of money. Honestly, I do believe that they deserve to be able to profit and make some money to be able to run a successful business. And I'm hoping that with them being able to charge more, we're also going to encourage more people to come into the space and have it more readily available, because people say, well, now I can make a little bit more money. Maybe it makes sense. It was almost a money losing operation. So Mr. Ellison, I do think that it's important that we give them an opportunity to make some money there.
Chair, if I may add on to that, Madam Vice Chair, through you to Assemblyman Ellison.
Please just go directly to the member. Thank you.
You got it. Mike Draper for the record. Assemblyman Ellison, also, it's important to remember that this isn't mandating that these rates be charged. This is allowing someone the ability to charge that, but there will be businesses that will continue to offer some of these services for free. And really, the other thing to take into account is sometimes the time that goes into to this. So not only are we talking about the cost of supplies and the bonding and the licensure and things like that, but we're also talking about, I know in our office, we have 2 notaries, and sometimes that process, depending on what documents and what things are going through, can take 30 minutes or so. So when you're a small business and you're a mom and pop organization, sometimes that time should have a value to it. So again, we're not talking about a significant profit margin, but we are talking the ability to cover your costs and your time, and especially for as more and more services are going mobile.
And I appreciate that. And for a follow-up, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, don't they charge an extra service to go mobile for, say, somebody that's a senior that can't get out or whatever, and they need to get a notary? Don't they actually charge for more to do that service?
Hi, thank you, Assemblyman, for that question. Assemblyman Edgar Flores, for the record. Yeah, they can. If you read a little bit further down on page 2 of the actual bill, you'll see some of that where they can charge additional fees if they're working between the hours of 6 a.m. And 7 p.m. for travel. If you see, if they're having to travel X amount of distance, they can charge additional for that as well.
And I think that's justifiable. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the bill. Like I said, the only thing is I took a bunch of stuff that was off of the ranch here a while back, and even though I'm not there anymore, by the time I had to have every one of them stamped, I don't know, it was $150 or more. I thought, wow, when it used to be free at the bank, and they don't do that no more. So, but I understand. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Assemblyman, for the questions. Members, I don't see any other questions. I'll just give you a moment. I think that some people might have had their questions answered during the hearing. So I'll just give you a moment. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat. All right, seeing no additional questions, we will next hear testimony in support of Assembly Bill 245. Let's go to the phones. Broadcast, please.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 245, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 573, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Monica Pappas, Pappas.
Go ahead, Ms. Pappas.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for your time, Chairman, Vice Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and Assembly members. My name is Monica Pappas, Pappas. I am owner of Fingerprinting Express with stores in Carson City, Reno, and Las Vegas. I am a Nevada Notary Public since 2012, and I also employ 20 Nevada Notary Publics, 95% of which are females and minorities. The important thing to note here is that the Notary Public designation is with the person. It's a portable skill. It does not stay with the company. We invest in our staff and train them for their Notary Public because it's such an important service to the public. As mentioned before, a lot of banks do no longer perform Notary Public services, but some of the smaller branches and credit unions do that for free for their members. It is important to also note that a Notary Public, if the fees are $150, we're usually sitting there for an hour or longer to complete the Notary Public transaction. It's also important to notice here that being a Notary Public, you're able to be an independent contractor and entrepreneur. And it's also important that we, with the liability that Notary Publics have, notarizing wills, power of attorneys, real estate documents, we have so much liability that it's also important that we are good at what we do. And if someone can do this as a main business and not a side job, we are going to serve Nevadans at a higher level, being experts at the documentation. Having a rejection can delay things for people, and that's the last thing that we want to have happen. The fees have increased significantly. When I started being a notary public in 2012, my notary journal was $12. Today, my notary journal is $44. So it's hardly a super lucrative business. It works for us because it's an ancillary business. A lot of people need fingerprints and a notary for their applications to get a job, and they can get all of those services at one place. So I really just wanted to stress to the committee today that it is mainly for independent contractors and entrepreneurs to create their own business without having a formal education. All they have to do is complete the classes through the Nevada State Secretary and then get their bonds and get started. So it's really a great opportunity for people to start their own business. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Pappas. And broadcast, is there any other testimony in support?
Caller with the last three digits of 518. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Go
ahead, caller.
Hi, my name is Tayden Cardlow. My last name is spelled Partlow. First name Taiden. And I'm actually, notary public in Las Vegas myself. I work independently, under my LLC, Totally Mobile Notary. And so my main function is as a mobile notary. I've been a notary since late 2019 after I moved to Las Vegas. And I found that my full-time job didn't necessarily cover all my expenses. So I started working after hours and on my days off to provide this service. And although it's definitely, supplementing my income, it's not something that I could do full-time without also having a full-time job. And since 2020, I've actually received an increase in requests, almost probably half, tenfold, I would say, actually, of people who are in their homes and wanting to practice social distancing. And also, of course, since 2020, I've gone into hospitals, I've gone into nursing homes, and I've helped people who are, making that transition out of, our world and everything. And so I've actually felt more like a frontline worker and going sometimes driving an hour and a half. Of course, we can only charge $20. So driving an hour and a half during rush hour to go for one signature and get $25. I've done it because it's a part of my duty as a notary public, but it definitely doesn't always feel worth it. And it's kind of, become counterproductive since I'm also putting myself and my family at risk going into people's homes and not necessarily having all the coverage that I could have, seeing as to how it's an independent job. There's no healthcare coverage or anything like that for it outside of my full-time job. So I am for this bill. I think it would be great incentives for people to be notaries. But I also think that it's definitely necessary for us to be able to cover all of our costs of travel, costs of, living, and just to be able to supplement our income more and make it more worthwhile.
Thank you for your testimony. Next caller, please.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We'll now hear testimony in opposition of AB 245.
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 245, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to testify who is neutral on this bill?
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 245, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you, Broadcast. Chair Flores, are there any closing comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Assemblyman Edgar Flores for the record. I know that Assemblywoman Thomas has requested to be added as a co-sponsor, and absolutely I will be doing that. If anybody else is interested, just reach out and we'll get that taken care of. I wanted to thank you all for your time, the indulgence this morning. And I hope that we're going to very much empower some small businesses and be able to go after some of these bad actors. Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Chair. And I know Assemblywoman Considine is interested in co-sponsoring the legislation as well. So hopefully they can reach out to you after this hearing so that they can make that happen. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 245, and I'll pass the virtual gavel back over to Chair Flores.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And at this time, and I thank you again to Ms. Gail Anderson and Mr. Draper and Fingerprinting Express. At this time, I see that we have Assemblywoman Kusama joining us. Again, sorry for the confusion earlier today, Assemblywoman. We've been trying to make it work for everybody, but thank you for joining us. So at this time, I'd like to open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 325. Whenever you're ready, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Chair Flores, and thank you to the members of the Government Affairs Committee for allowing me to present this morning. For the record, I am Assemblywoman Heidi Kusama, and I am here to present Assembly Bill 325. So this bill has to do with the recording of documents. So currently in statute, we do allow for the recording of electronically filed documents. However, this would give the ability, if needed, for the documents that have been signed electronically to be printed out to a paper copy, attach an example of the prescribed certificate certifying that the attached paper copy is true and correct for the recorder's office to accept. I want to also point out on Nellis, we have 2 amendments for you to read. And this is to help with a little cleanup for the title industry and recording. And so with that, I have 2 presenters here as well. I would like to present Rocky Finseth with Carrera, Nevada, who wants to add a few comments as well.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Kusama. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, good morning. Rocky Finseth, ROCKY-FINSETH with Carrera, Nevada. Pleasure to be with all of you today. Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to walk you through the 2 components of the bill, and then I will turn the rest of the speaking time over to Ms. Sylvia Smith-Turk from the Nevada Land Title Association, who will walk you through why we need, why the industry is bringing the bill forward today. As the Assemblywoman mentioned, it's a fairly straightforward bill. Section 1 simply authorizes the submission of the paper documentation to a county recorder's office. And Section 2 of the bill simply prescribes what that form should look like. As the Assemblywoman has also mentioned, the association has submitted a conceptual amendment that should be up on Nellis, and that would simply change the effective date for the legislation to July 1st, 2020. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'd like to turn the remainder of the time over to Ms. Sylvia Smith-Turk with the Nevada Land Title Association. Sylvia?
Please.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. My name is Sylvia, first name spelled S-Y-L-V-I-A. Last name is Smith-Turk, S-M-I-T-H-T-U-R-K. I am a past president of the Nevada Land Title Association and a member of NLTA for short, NLTA's legislative committee. First, on behalf of the NLTA, we would like to thank Assemblywoman Kusama for bringing forth this issue. In 2017, the Nevada Legislature passed remote online electronic notarization legislation, which I want to bring forward provided an invaluable tool to our industry and many others during the pandemic and allowing us to close certain real estate transaction utilizing this important legislation. One of the things that we realized after the initial bill and regulations were written was that we did not have a provision called papering out. What that means, it's papering out of an electronic signed and notarized document, being able to print that document and certify that that electronic document has been unchanged and is now going to be used in a paper format. And the bill also provides provisions allowing the county recorders to the authority to record that papered out originally electronically signed document. What is papering out? Generally, it's a 3-step process. It's like I explained, when a document in its true electronic format has gone through the process of being signed, when approved by obviously the person signing, there is a true electronic notary who has gone through Nevada's requirements to become an electronic notary in Nevada. It then allows us to be able to, another notary, to be able to review that document in its electronic format, print it out, and then attach a certification that certifies that is a true and accurate, unchanged copy. The paper out document then could be submitted for recording. The certification is basically the confirmation, like I said, that certain characteristics of the document have not been changed or altered. Why is it necessary? It provides a tool for our industry in particular to be able to record a document. There were several instances over the last couple years, and I'll speak just for Washoe County, where our county recorder had some pretty serious technical issues, and they were unable to e-record for more than 1 day at a time. So we actually had to physically go to the recorder's office and record documents like we used to do back in the day. And we realized that without this paper out provision, if we would have had a transaction that had been electronically signed, we had no mechanism to paper that document out and serve that consumer by being able to go and record it. It's also necessary from time to time that should one party involved in our case, a real estate transaction, not be able to countersign the document electronically, either because they don't have the ability to have the technology or they're just not comfortable doing it. It then allows us to paper out and continue on with a live wet signature of a notary and the person signing. That concludes my testimony. I certainly am here and there may be questions on this. We respectfully ask that you pass the bill. I thank you very much for your time this morning. I am here to answer any questions for you, and thank you again, Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Kasama, do we have anybody else we want to go to, or any other remarks from you?
No, those are the only presenters. And again, we appreciate the committee hearing us. I know that this, I believe this same situation came up in Texas where it started with where kind of these loopholes or the rare times where we need to have this fixed. So this is kind of a cleanup fix-up for when we need those occasions to paper out the electronically signed documents. And so I appreciate everybody's hearing it, and I urge you all to pass AB 325, which will help all of our businesses that need recording of documents.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. So at this time, we'll go to questions, and I'm now looking through the chat to see if there's anybody there wishing to ask away. Members, I don't see any questions on the chat. Have I missed anybody on accident?
I have a quick question, if I may.
Madam Vice Chair, please.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Assemblywoman. I appreciate it. I'm just wondering if I can get some clarification as to the amendment. So So I'm looking at the language for the amendment. So are we removing like the entirety of section 2 as it is and then replacing it with the language for where it says NRS 240.199 and then just adding that language completely and then striking section 3? Or are we keeping the other remaining language in section 2 that's not stricken?
So I will allow Rocky to answer that question.
Thanks, Assemblywoman. Thanks, Madam Vice.
You're muted.
Princess.
I apologize for that. Thanks, Assemblywoman Kasama. Thanks, Madam Vice Chair. I believe somebody from the Secretary of State's office is available and will be addressing that amendment. So if you don't mind, prefer to leave that, leave a response to your question to the Secretary of State's office representative.
And then a quick follow-up, if I may, as Chair. I apologize. Thank you. And so then just to be clear, then we're, you're presenting the bill without the amendment from the Secretary of State's office, and then this is an amendment that currently is not friendly, just so I understand.
So this amendment is from the Secretary of State's office, and it is very friendly, and we want it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
And I believe, do we have the Secretary of State's office on here?
Good morning. Yes, hi, I'm Kim Parandi, Deputy Secretary of State for Commercial Recordings. And good morning to all the committee members and Chair Flores. Thank you for the opportunity to present this. As they have mentioned, this is a friendly amendment. We met together and worked this out. Just to explain kind of what we're proposing here. As Ms. Turk said, electronic notarization was passed in the 2017 session, and currently all 17 counties in Nevada do electronically accept documents for recording. The importance of electronic notarization is the security of the document and the whole flow of the process so that there isn't any opportunity for tampering of the documents. But the Secretary of State's office does understand the problem, and we are not opposed to the new process being offered here. What we're asking for in this amendment is to isolate the papering out process in Chapter 240 to the specific section pertaining to electronic notarization and electronic documents. Our concern was just that we felt by placing it in its own section or in the general section of 240, there may be confusion with notaries who are not e-notaries and might feel that, you know, anytime they print out a document from an electronic form, not an electronically notarized document, they might be confused and think that they have to attach this certification. So we know that 17 other states are doing this, and the language that we've offered here is very similar. The short form is very much like the other states do, and so we are very much in support. The changes here are just changing it from a general section in 240 to the 240-199, which is specific to electronic notarization. Thank you.
Thank you. That answers my question. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And we'll continue with questions. I don't believe I see any other questions, but members, if I missed you, if you could please unmute yourself at this time. Seeing none, thank you, Assemblywoman Kasama. At this time, we'll invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 325. If we could please go to the phone lines. Broadcast, please.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 325, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 448, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Tiffany Banks, TIFFANY BANKS. Chairman Flores, members of the committee, my name is Tiffany Banks and I'm General Counsel for the Nevada Realtors. The Realtors appreciate Assemblywoman Kasama bringing AB 325 forward and are in full support of the bill. It is so important that closings happen on time and that the property is able to record and not be delayed from a technical glitch. Thank you for the opportunity to express our support.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 325.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 325.
To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 325, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. If at this time we can go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 325.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 325, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Kasama, any closing remarks you may have?
I think as you can see, it's just really kind of a straightforward cleanup bill. Urge you to pass it. It just helps with the recording of documents. And thank you again to the chair and the committee for your time this morning.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. At this time, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 325. And before we open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 365, I want to make sure that we've given them ample time to log in. I don't believe they have.
I'm here.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh, I see you now. Thank you.
Thanks.
At this time, I'd like to open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 365. Good morning, Assemblywoman.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Assemblyman Ellison?
Mr. Chair, I have to log off for a few minutes. I'll log back in when I'm done.
Understood. Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Peters, whenever you're ready. Assembly Bill 365.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, I am Sarah Peters, representing Assembly District 24 in Reno. I am here to present Assembly Bill 365. As I'm sure you know, a number of federal laws have been enacted to protect rights of workers and those seeking employment. The first landmark legislation, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, was followed by other statutes, including the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Equal Pay Act, the Uniformed Services Employment and Re-Employment Rights Act, and several others. Nevada incorporated these laws and expanded upon federal legislation in its own public policy, which protects one's right to seek, obtain, and hold employment without discrimination, distinction, or restriction because of race, religious creed, color, age, sex, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, national origin, or ancestry. Subsequently, the state has adopted policies and practices to ensure fair hiring and employment practices that meet these federal and state standards, including investigations of complaints related to such matters. However, despite the state's proactive policies regarding discrimination in the workplace, gaps remain in our ability to gauge the effectiveness of these efforts in retaining a diverse workforce. Currently, there is no process for tracking or validating complaints associated with office-related culture that may be toxic or inhospitable to employees, particularly related to those with diverse backgrounds. Without this data, there's no way to track non-federally protected complaints or allegations to determine if a systemic problem exists or assess how to fix it. Additionally, there is currently no established standard for training regarding diverse employment retention and implicit bias. Our state has incredible diversity, as is reflected in this body. I often wonder why some state divisions continue to lack the diversity reflective of the state's population. We adopted hiring practices that are intended to increase diversity in applicants to state positions. However, we often continue to miss the mark as it relates to retention of employees with diverse backgrounds. It has been the policy of the state to direct non-federally protected complaints to the individual divisions, human resources, or management to handle. And there has been no formal review of this process or the complaints and best practices policies implemented as a result of those complaints. In the last year, our country has been reflecting on disparities among people of color and their white counterparts. We've continued to see elevated disparities between women and men in the workplace, exacerbated by the conditions of the pandemic, and also reflective of the different needs of women in the workforce. Our state workforce has a history of being a place where people love to work, and retention was among the highest of any employment field. However, we are hearing from department after department that retention at the state is one of the biggest challenges our agencies are dealing with. Again, this got me to wonder why. I additionally reflect on my own challenges in the traditional work environment. I have been the primary provider for my family, required maternity leave 3 times, required flexibility to maintain my milk production during my nursing journey, again 3 times, while attempting to go back to work as normal, which included mandatory travel to meet client deadlines, meetings scheduled during my pumping times, meetings scheduled at buildings that were not necessarily equipped to meet the needs of a pumping mother. I went to meetings and dinners and met deadlines when my body and baby wanted to be home. Don't get me wrong, I had immense amounts of support from my boss and clients and even employees of this state who offered accommodations multiple times, but it was an immense amount of effort to maintain normalcy in my job and for my growing family. Not everyone gets this level of support. It is not mandatory. Whether it's parents who need to pick up their kids or want to attend a midday matinee of their child's pageant performance, whether it's someone trying a new hairstyle or dealing with undiagnosed health conditions that get unsolicited questions and comments. These are unprotected scenarios that can result in passive-aggressive comments, actions, and attitudes, leaving the employee wondering why they want to work in such an environment at all. There are also issues of microaggressions. Microaggressions, to simplify, are defined as a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instant of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. These are sometimes subtle and often not recognizable to someone who lacks experience in identifying racial discrimination. Assembly Bill 365 declares that it is a public policy of this state that persons employed by the state be afforded respect, dignity, and equity in the workplace. The bill requires the departments of the state government to annually prepare and submit to the government or to the governor and the legislature a report concerning equity in the workplace, which includes a summary of each complaint filed by an employee, which alleges conduct which is not unlawful, but is against the declared public policy of the state, and any action taken in response to such a complaint. The bill also requires the administrator of the Division of Human Resource Management to evaluate the effectiveness of any policy of the division intended to encourage equity in the workforce for persons of color and other persons of marginalized identities, and prepare and submit a report to the governor and the legislature concerning the evaluation. Additionally, this bill defines marginalized identity to mean an identity that causes or has historically caused a person of such an identity to be disproportionately subject to discrimination, harassment, or other negative treatment as a result of the identity. Finally, Assembly Bill 365 requires the Personnel Commission to adopt regulations for training of supervisors and managerial employees concerning implicit bias. I want to remind the body that just this summer, we declared racism as a public health crisis and have self-reflective work to do to ensure that we are setting standards in the state to be as anti-racist as possible. This bill is a small step in getting much needed data to meet this goal, as well as the goal of retaining a high-quality, diverse workforce that feels supported and appreciated for the hard work they do to take care of the state. Chair, I am open for questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Appreciate you walking us through that. I am now checking through the chat to see if we have any questions. Members, I don't see any questions in the chat. but I may have accidentally skipped somebody. If you wish to ask a question, could you please unmute yourself at this time?
Mr. Chair, may I just make a comment?
Please.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Brown May for the record. First, I just would like to say thank you very much for bringing this bill forward. I have spent the last 20 years of my life as a disability advocate, and on many occasions, we've had individuals who have been diagnosed with autism or other developmental disabilities that have entered the employ of the state. And while the hiring practices are very solid, you're absolutely right about the need for training and ongoing support. So I just want to say thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, any additional questions?
Assemblymember Anderson, I've got one.
Please, Assemblywoman.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward, Assemblymember Peters. It's a very strong bill. My question has to do with section 5, 2A, with the requirements for the training of supervisors and managerial employees concerning implicit biases. Would that be done on a yearly basis, or would that be a one-time shot as soon as they become managers? How do you envision that, or do you feel that that is something that the Board of Examiners should make that decision about from the commissioners?
Let me unmute myself first. Assemblywoman Peters for the record. Thanks for the question. This is an area that I think as a country, we are really analyzing. What is the importance of training efforts and what is effective? So right now, there's not a great roadmap to effective implicit bias training, but it exists. We at the University of Nevada, Reno have a training program for hiring practices and recognizing implicit bias in the hiring practices. And there are a number of other, I think, professionals in the state of Nevada who are really working on this particular issue, especially in the light of what we've been talking about kind of nationally this year around racism and the need for a solid education of our communities on what that looks like and how to overcome that. So my intention here is for it to be kind of a working document, that it be addressed as the needs arise, that these assessments of the complaints as they come in help us identify where we really need to work on, what management is educated in and how they promulgate effective policy and regulation to continue to work towards that diverse workforce and anti-racist agenda.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, any additional questions? I don't believe we have any at this time. I'd like to go into...
Chair, I thought Assemblywoman Dickman raised her hand.
Assemblywoman Dickman, did you have a question?
Yes, please, just quick. I couldn't type in the chat quick enough.
No, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was wondering if you know of areas where we are not behaving well. And, instances you might know. I mean, don't we already treat people with respect and dignity? And I know I do.
Thank you for the question. And I think that, sorry, Assemblywoman Peters for the record, I think that's an important piece of this. There is no intended enforcement piece here or consequence piece here aside from helping to direct people's implicit bias, which oftentimes we don't recognize in ourselves, right? Because it's a product of where we came from, how we were raised, the communities that we're a part of, even like how we were educated, so those are underlying conditions of implicit bias that can result in just uncomfortable statements being made, or the expectation of certain people to meet a standard that's not necessarily the standard we would have as a state, but is more of a personal bias standard. So I don't want to call out any one entity in the state, but this is an issue that we've heard from employees who have left the state, particularly those who are people of color and women of color, just saying that it was not a good fit for them because it didn't meet them where they needed to be met. And some of those complaints included I can't walk down the hallway without someone reaching out to touch my hair. That's uncomfortable, but I think that there are a lot of people who wouldn't see that as being aggressive, but just don't know what the person's experience is and why that feels uncomfortable and creates a toxic culture and workplace for them.
So this is not, I'm not being facetious or anything, but what about the person who might enjoy that attention of someone who does reach out and tweet and touch their hair? I mean, maybe I'm not expressing this properly, but so how do we decide whose needs we meet? Maybe I'm not saying this right.
And I think maybe the touching a hair is not a great example because that really is an autonomy and consent-based issue that I think if you want to reach out and touch someone's hair, you can ask for permission to, and that person can give you permission to. Right now, there's no set standard for that and no ability for us to assess whether that's a cultural issue or not. But I do see where you're coming from and that we don't want to overshoot the mark, right? And make everybody like walk on eggshells, which is why I think the training component is particularly important. And the aggregation of the complaints is particularly important, because then we can look at kind of the whole of a culture. Where are we seeing consistent trends and issues related to toxic work culture? Where can we direct managerial training to address those issues, right? Even if it's mediation, right, between the two parties in which are included in that non-federally protected complaint. Those kinds of things are areas that we could work on, and not just here, but I think everywhere could work on that, right? That's just a part of having successful relationships with people, is being able to meet people where they are at and identify places where we could be more competent and consistent in our treatment of people as a whole.
Thank you so much for just expanding a little bit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, for the presentation. My question was just kind of with maybe the genesis of this. I was just wondering if there were particular agencies that you've identified statistically or even anecdotally that have been, problematic in this regard, that kind of, inspired this need, or if this is more, I'll just leave it at that. Whether there are certain agencies that you think this really is needed for. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. So I work with some agencies in my day job. I also, growing up in this area, have a number of friends who've gone in and out of state government. And then there are articles that are published in the news. And I kept seeing this consistent trend of like the people who were complaining, the people who were being targeted, the people who were uncomfortable in our work environment, predominantly being women or people of color, women of color. And I got to questioning, what's going on? Why are we having these consistent trends, although anecdotal? So I did ask for some information from the state, and we don't collect any of it, which is where this bill comes into play. It's important for us to have that data so that we can look at what kind of policies are reasonable to adopt to be able to address the root causes of why we're seeing the mass exodus of women of color from certain agencies or whatever the case may be. Again, I can't direct this at any one agency, in part because we don't have the data for them, and it is all anecdotal, and there's no way currently for us to address those policy needs in agencies. But that's part of why I wanted to establish this is really a baseline and foundational rule for the state, that our goal is to have a diverse workforce that adds to the quality of the services that the state offers in the state, while being anti-racist and really accommodating the needs of people today.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Again, going through the chat, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself at this time. Okay, I think we now have everyone who wanted to inquire. So at this time, we'll invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 365.
To testify in support. To testify in support of Assembly Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 365.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 365.
To testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Peters, any closing remarks you may have?
Thank you, Chair. Assemblywoman Peters, for the record. Thank you, committee, for hearing this bill. I urge you to support this legislation as it helps us gauge the effectiveness of our efforts to ensure that there is no discrimination in state employment and that state employees will be treated with the dignity and respect that they deserve.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 365, and we look forward to continue to work with you, Assemblywoman Peters. Next, we'll go to public comment. I want to remind those of you wishing to testify during public comment that we, number one, encourage you to do so. Always call in. We want you to do that. However, I just want to remind you that it is not a time to reopen a hearing. There's a time for you to call in and discuss general matters that fall within the purview of this committee. So please call in. I just want to make sure that you don't try to reopen a hearing. Broadcast, please.
To take place in the public comment queue, please press *9 now. Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Members, I want to remind you that tomorrow we'll be meeting at 9 a.m. We're going to be hearing Assembly Bill 304, Assembly Bill 333, and Assembly Bill 385. Give yourself an opportunity to become familiar with that. And I'd like to adjourn in honor of Latino Lobby Day. Had we not been, unfortunately, in the middle of this pandemic, we would have seen this building with a whole host of small businesses, nonprofits, and individuals who proudly contribute every day to our community. So I just wanted to say thank you to all those wonderful, empowered Latinos out there putting in work and for all the work you do. And with that, this meeting's adjourned.